Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episodes of 12 Monkeys. Like I did with the premiere, obviously, I'm talking about all 3 episodes together, so do know I might be bouncing around, but I'm going to try and do the episodes in order, just kind of discussing them and breaking them down episode by episode, but I'll probably end up mixing a lot of stuff together, so I do apologize. So just kind of know that ahead of time. So obviously, breaking into the first episode, we have them going back to 1852, and it's still kind of messed. I mean, obviously, this season, I really enjoy the fact is that this season, I feel like we're getting time periods and environments I never would have thought we would have ever got. Like, especially like you compare like the beginning of the series to where we are now, like them going so far back in time and stuff like that. It seems like crazy to think about it. But to be fair, you even take someone. We never actually got to see it within the show, but even like Ethan went through a lot of like time periods much further in the past. So there's that. But like I said, we never got to see it on screen, but it's still kind of, so it still exists in a continuity, but it's just like we only get to see these. But even then, seeing the time periods we do get to see, like where the show is going to, is kind of crazy to think about that. But I love that basically we end up finding out that Elliot, Joan's ex-husband, Hannah's dad, is in the past. And it's like, right, we have not seen him since is that season 3? Or is that season 2? When there was a whole, like, him discussing building Titan. That might have been season 2, because I think that was around the time the tall man had taken over running, like, being the one that the witness relied on, like, talk to. So there's that. So, which I'll get to that in a second about the tall man, but that was kind of an interesting twist. I did not expect, like, I know, honestly, it didn't cross my mind to think that Elliot would pop back up in the story, but I figured as much because, like, we as the audience know that he built Titan, because we were there when the tall man told him, like, oh yeah, here's the plan to build Titan. But obviously, like, the way the show portrays it is that Jones and the others were under the impression, like, oh, they took his research and built upon it and made Titan. That's what they were thinking, but they had no idea. I mean, to be fair, Elliot had no idea about, like, what this was all going to turn into, the Army of the 12 Monkeys, the whole, I mean, because let's not forget, this all kind of dates back to Ramsey, you know, like working with the 12 Monkeys, making sure that the splinter, the machine gets created in the first place. So there's that whole thing too. So like, obviously he didn't really think too much about it, because for him, it was never about the whole like messing with time and doing stuff like the 12 Monkeys are trying to do. It was more so just for the fact of the matter is, it's like, oh yeah, there's a cure for cancer. Oh, it's going to take 100 years. Oh, let me pop there and bring it back to now. Like there's that. So once again, kind of one of those having the best intentions situations. But what's so fascinating about Elliot's situation, I thought was interesting, and it kind of makes sense in retrospect on many different levels, is the fact is, I never once thought about the fact is, oh yeah, like building Titan is quite the project, especially being as big as it is, and just the whole, you know, splintering an entire, make the argument almost like an entire city, basically, the way Titan's designed and everything. So it's like, yeah, it never crossed my mind to think like, yeah, that's probably not the easiest thing to build present day or in the future. Because even Jennifer asked, like, why not build it in the future? It's like, well, because in the future, most of humanity is dead, so you don't have the labor force, but you go back in time, you do it in the past. For one, I'm sure you can find an empty enough place where it's like it won't draw too much attention. I'm sure it probably would draw even more attention in the past, but I guess you get the right setup and stuff like that, and people won't ask questions. Plus, people aren't as looked after in that time period, because Cassie explains it, like if a couple people go missing, like you're kind of okay, so you have a stronger and easier labor force to kind of use and dispose of if need be. And I was like, that's such a fascinating thing to think about, that's what Titan's designed. Like Titan was actually made far into the past, and then like because it seems like the way Elliot kind of made it, it was kind of like it's supposed to be made of all these smaller pieces that were built at different points in time, and then at one point in time, like it's supposed to be one singular moment where all of Titan comes together, like in a complete form. Because as we know it now, where the story has been, Titan, where we are with Olivia as the witness and stuff like that, Titan is not complete, and that's what this whole storyline is about. Obviously, Elliot and Jones meet again, and then the whole conversation of like, yep, Hannah, give me and your father some time alone. And it's like, wait, what? And we kind of found out what happened between Elliot and Jones, and it turns out, which is weird, I know, calling her Jones, considering it's Katarina, just to make that less confusing. But it's because it turns out that like it was just kind of sad circumstances. Like at the time, Katarina didn't want to be a mother, but Elliot wanted to be a father, but then Katarina was going to get rid of the baby. So for him, he took all his research and everything and left her. because he thought that was the only thing he was going to have left. But unbeknownst to him, Katarina would eventually have a change of mind. I guess the argument could be made because she spent that time, I mean, obviously meeting Cole and Cassie, it kind of changed her mind at that time. Maybe just, I don't know. I think that played a big influence. Probably seeing Cole with his dad and stuff like that. Maybe that changed her mind about everything. But still, it's kind of interesting. Because I was wondering, like, what happened. It's like, oh, yeah, I can remember, like, they were only married for, like, 6 days, and it just kind of, like, I was like, oh, did something bad happen? Did he just dump her? Like, we never really got a good explanation. We finally have one. It's like, oh, it's just, like I said, it was just sad circumstances. Like, she changed her mind, but by the time she had changed her mind, he'd already left and stuff like that. So, because at the time, she was adamant about not being, because for her, it's like, oh, yeah, the sciencey stuff, that's what I'm good at, so I'm going to aim at that, because she thought, having a kid would subtract from that, because for her, it's like, she was scared of doing something she wasn't great at, and that was being a mom. She didn't know what to do about that. So I mean, it's even sadder on many different levels, because Elliot hasn't really gotten a chance to know his daughter. I mean, hell, Jones never really did it. Katarina never did either, just because she spent so much time away from Anna. I mean, obviously they've been making up for her. I mean, I'm skipping around and stuff like that, but sadly, even like, he never will get to know his daughter really that well. I mean, at least where things stand now, because he ended up dying, which sucks super bad. I just had an inkling. I was like, yeah, he's not going to survive this. Just the fact is that they haven't run into him this entire time. I mean, because that was never it never came up of like, yeah, what exactly happened to him? Why did we never see him again? Like, after, so it's kind of like, oh, maybe I guess that argument could be made, like, oh, maybe the 12 monkeys killed him. I mean, but now we kind of know where his story ends up, like him dying back in 1852. So, killed by none other than Deacon, too, which is very interesting, which is a complex situation, because it's like, oh, because I love that Cole immediately pieces together, because Cassie's like, why is he doing this? Like, most likely because we left him for dead. I was like, kind of nailed that on the head. But I did like the whole, like, him trying to, make better the situation. Especially, he's like, okay, so I'll try and distract Tall Man. You guys do the whole situation of, like, Team Splinter. I was like, I love that you call them that. They've never actually had, like, an official team name, so that's kind of neat. I also love that, too. Like, I feel like it's become more and more of a thing as the series has progressed. Like, the teams have gotten bigger. Like, a lot of people were being sent, like, as a group team. I guess, especially at this point in time where, like, the team, like, there's so many few people left. This is the time where we have to, because it's like, oh, in the past it was only Cole going, then Cole and Cassie / Cole, Cassie, and Ramsey, and now it's just kind of like Cole, Cassie, Jennifer, Hannah, and the occasions Joan. So it's just kind of interesting to me. And it was also a very interesting thing too, because obviously this also deals with the fact is that Jennifer hasn't let anyone know that she doesn't have her primary abilities, and it's something that Cassie points out, and I thought that was probably kind of going to be the explanation for it. Is Cassie's like, she was scared, and I think it's because it's like she was scared everyone was going to turn on her, in the sense of they just leave her behind, like, oh, because you're not a primary, you're not a part of this team, forget about you, type of, like, she's worried about being left behind. Like, these people become like a family to her, and she's just scared that maybe they won't. She'll feel, she feels lost without her purpose, and so she's scared of, like, I don't know what to do, which kind of sadly inadvertently makes her kind of act a little rash just because of that fear. Just because, I guess it's because when she has kind of proved to not be useful in the past, she's kind of gotten locked away or just kind of thrown to the side, and I think she was scared of that, rather because she feels like, especially because of how important this all is, and it's like, oh, I'm not at 100% in this situation. I think the situation, I mean, and just the way things kind of played out, it kind of seems like, oh, her losing her abilities was on purpose. At the very least, it seems like it's because basically the primaries are trying to, because Olivia can track them because of just everything. Now that she's kind of all souped up with the time stream, like, she can track them. So the whole point was, like, Jennifer trying to talk to the other primaries just ended up giving Olivia the foothold she needs, which she ends up taking possession of Jennifer in this episode, which once again kind of points out the point, like, that is probably going to be something we're going to see potentially more. Like, still, even at this point in time, this is only the second time we've seen it so far this season. So once again, whether it's going to be a bigger thing or not, we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But she hasn't really fully utilized it to, like, a much bigger degree yet so far. I mean, I guess you can make the argument what she did in the premiere episodes kind of makes up for that too, but nevertheless, like I said, it's just sad because of Jennifer's need to try and feel useful again, feeling like she's lost her purpose. Because of that, like Olivia now knows like, oh, what they're up to, what the weapon is. It is kind of interesting because I feel like this also kind of shows you more what primaries are capable of. Because there was like when Olivia tried to attack, like the primaries put up like this blue barrier. Obviously these are primaries we saw die in the premiere in the Middle Ages, so which is interesting. I know I'm skipping around, but it's like, yeah, they're going to go to that time period soon. So it's kind of everything's coming full circle again anyway. So it's fascinating. Time travel, man. It's crazy how everything works like that. But what's also interesting too is because of the whole time travel thing too, is like we have 2 episodes in particular that deal with tall men. Obviously this is like they end up running into him. It's like, I thought you said Olivia killed him. It's like, yeah, well, this is him before that happened. It's like, oh yeah, that's still that weird thing of you're running. Yeah, you're technically running into Ghost. Yeah, this is all the stuff that he did before he eventually gets to where he is, where Olivia ends up killing him. So not even realizing that the witness that he's serving this entire time, the one he's talking to, is his sister, and it just makes him being like Deacon being like, oh, the witness has spoken, and being like him not realizing what's happening, just him kind of playing his own cycle. It's just kind of interesting. What I also think is so interesting is the fact is that I think these episodes also nailed is like the desperation Cole has, because for him, he feels like it's like, no, everything is riding on his shoulders. He can't fail. It's up to him. The primaries gave him this mission. They're going to give him the weapon. He has to be the one to wield it and end all of this. And I just think it's such an interesting thing. Like, and because of that, like Cole is being more, not necessarily rash. I guess you can still make the argument, but he's so full steam ahead of like, it's almost like he is kind of losing the peripheral vision of just looking at what's around him. It seems like he's almost kind of losing sight to a certain degree, because obviously the second episode kind of pushes in that direction more. I love that whole thing at the beginning though, when him and Cassie are together, and it's just like they found what they're looking for, potentially where the weapon might be. Jennifer did, and she's knocking on the door. It's like, yeah, we know what you're in there doing. You know what happened last time. So from this point on, only butt stuff. And then just Cassie's face, I was just like being mortified. I was just like, I love that. But once again, that second episode is a great example and the beauty of what the show does. It's something I've talked about, like where it's like, oh, there's one thing happening here. You're not realizing later. It's not till later when you realize that a time travel thing was happening here, and it makes it kind of go full circle of like, oh, this is happening. Oh, this was actually this the entire time. Like obviously everything kind of breaking down to the point that it does. It's like, oh, Cole gets poisoned. But then, like, Cassie goes back in time to try and tell him, but he's still like, no, we got to get the weapon. He gets poisoned, him and Cassie. They end up meeting Tall Man's dad, played by Christopher Lloyd. He pops up again. And Tall Man himself, which has got to be super annoying to keep running into him. I guess they get some satisfaction knowing, like, well, at the very least, we know where his story ends up. But it's just kind of like all these little things kind of happening. Cole decides that, like, no, he's like the one who ends up getting cured, who needs to get cured is Cassie. And that kind of leads to a whole situation where it's like, oh, Jennifer was sent further back in time. And it's like, lo and behold, who did she join forces with? Gale, which this wasn't a surprise to me because I kind of already got spoiled that Gale, because I think it was like when I was looking up like stuff about the premiere, like, you know, the whole, how this whole season is going to air thing, when I was reading about that like a little while back. I think I came across a video, and in the thumbnail of that video was Gale. And I was like, oh, so he's still alive. It's like, but in my thought, I was like, oh, they must go back further in time and meet up with him again or something like that, because it is a situation where Gale is like, yeah, I've known you most of my life, and then Cole's like, yeah, but we've only met like once, and he's like, right. Still, that was that thing. So, which I love the twist where it's like Gale actually survived that whole situation because he was warned about his future. He wore a bulletproof vest, and he ended up surviving, so that's why he's alive now. I also love the fact is that him and Jennifer having that conversation where she's kind of having her like trying to be secretive, and she's got the code and the glasses on and the hat, and she's kind of whispering. He's like, yeah, the army is what he's getting loud. He's being loud and stuff. She's like, oh my God, you're screwing up. You suck at this whole spy thing. So she gets his help. And then it's kind of wacky seeing them kind of work together and stuff like that. The red card that they were thinking like, oh, could this be from like the Russian spies? It's like, no, it's too bright and showy. It's like, oh, Gale and Jennifer actually had the car. There's a whole like, oh yeah, we can't get to this particular motel room because like someone's already occupied it, the one that's beside the one they're trying to go to. And it's like, oh, in actuality, that was actually Jennifer and Gail who got that one ahead of time. So, and then Jennifer's like, okay, I'm gonna ask questions ahead of time. So she kind of makes an oopsie and realizes like, oh man. And then Gail kills the dudes protecting her, and he's like, he sees there's no message on the wall. He's like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. We're the ones who write the message. I was like, oh, it's so crazy that Gail gets so swept up in it, that even to the point he's starting to understand how this whole time travel thing works too. It's just such funny. It's just sad because once again, it's just sad because Jennifer is trying so hard. She's overcompensating for the fact that once again, she's trying to be useful, but also at the same time, it's like her friends' futures are at stake. Plus, like, we need to get this weapon. So there's that whole complicated situation. So things kind of play out, but there's little steps in between. Obviously, Cassie saves Cole's life. At the very least, has to pretend like she didn't, so that she goes back in time, which will eventually lead to Jennifer coming back in time and making sure that Cole is saved to get the whole causality situation, like making sure everything stays intact. I thought it was so nice because like when like she was originally coming out the elevator, she got a headache and the guy was nearby. I was like, oh, like in my mind, I was like, wait, is that something crazy like supposed to be like her dad or something like that? That's why I having a paradox thing like that. I was like, which in retrospect is like, no, stupid, because she was near her mom and nothing happened. Cole has been around his dad and nothing happened. It doesn't work like that unless you are directly interacting with a version of yourself. It's not going to happen. That's why I felt like I was being stupid. I don't know why I thought like that, but then later on it's like, oh, the reason why she had that headache, because there was a paradox. There was future Cassie and present Cassie in the same room. Like, they just didn't cross paths. Like, Cassie tried to make sure that didn't happen. So I thought just little, like I said, just little details like that are so good. And then there's the whole Deacon situation, which I even like that Jennifer and Deacon have gained a bond, because like out of anyone, she's the one that kind of trusted him the most, even though they had the complicated relationship of like, yeah, I kind of killed you, so sorry. Which obviously he makes up for that at season 2's finale, because he ends up getting all those 12 Monkey followers to kind of be focused on him while she, escapes and everything. So, but I love it that Deacon was walking away and he's just kind of like, and he says the line of like, I'm where I want to be. And he winks at her. I was like, that's so good. So it kind of confirmed, I mean, the 3rd episode kind of confirms it too, but my thought, I'd say, so Deacon's playing the long game. Okay. To anyone that's listening to this, I don't remember exactly, if you remember correctly, Jennifer said the exact same thing about Olivia in season 3, where it's like that woman never wants to be anywhere she doesn't want to be. So that kind of was like him kind of referencing that, especially with the wink and everything. And it made Jennifer happy because she's like, oh my God, he's actually on our side. So turns out, Deacon's got the weapon and everything. So it's like, okay, we need to make this work. So we have to go back even further. But going back even further would mean that they'd have to go back to 1940, which is what the 3rd episode's about. But it's that little nice farewell. It's kind of interesting because Gail finally meets the entire squad, because Hannah's there. And so is Jones. This is his like first time meeting everybody. So it's just kind of neat. And just for him, and just like, I even love the line from Cole being like, yeah, I hope we never meet again. Which part of me feels like this is them kind of being like a farewell to that character too. Like, this might be the last time. I was halfway expecting when he was walking away that Cole would run into him and be like, okay, dude, so, okay. Because it's actually interesting kind of, since I am talking about that, like, because what I was trying to say is kind of like a situation where it's like, oh yeah, Cole from like further in the story comes. He's like, yo, Gail, I know I said this, but we need your help one last time. I thought that was something that was going to happen. Nevertheless, what I thought was kind of interesting before was like the fact is that Cole had the whole thought process of like, well, at the very least, the whole causality thing. I was like, obviously I'm okay enough. Nothing goes wrong because future asshole is a thing, because I'm alive long enough to obviously become future asshole to meet myself. And then I love that Cassie's referring to him as present asshole. So, because I think it's a very nice thing that this episode kind of touches on, which has been the thought process the entire series. Like, it's something Cole kind of talks about too, is where it's like, we were always going to end up, because for her, it's like, there's one or two things, because they've always talked about the end, but we've never talked about the after. Like, this can only end one way. By saving everything, you undo everything that's ever happened in this series, them ever knowing or even meeting each other. This Cole will never exist. Cassie will be back in her original time period, which also would beg the question, does that mean she'd still be with Aaron, which would be weird. At the same time, he cared about her, but still, it's kind of weird to think about. The fact is, because the alternate timeline, he's dead and everything. But the man she loves is actually not a man. He doesn't exist anymore, because the only version of him that exists at that point in time will be the kid version of him. So it's just kind of that sad thing, because they wouldn't remember this anyway. Even, I mean, there's obviously there are, I guess, powerful enough things that still exist, because even when the timeline where she had Ethan was erased, like she was still pregnant. Well, because she most likely had gotten pregnant beforehand anyway, but maybe Cole didn't really know at the no, like I think that was a good enough amount of time. Like, yeah, it was definitely. I forgot because that was like months later. So never mind. Ignore what I was just saying. So obviously the pregnancy stayed through, and then like Cassie still had memories. So I mean, who knows what could end up happening in the end with that whole situation? But nevertheless, it's that situation of like we can fight for ourselves, or we can save the future, but there's no doing both. But for Cole, it's like we both knew how this was always going to end, and that's the complicated thing of like on this journey they found each other, they fell in love, they had a son, and it's like they had this entire life, and it's like it's all going to be erased, and it's not fair. And I think that's the sad thing, is because now we're seeing Cassie kind of being swept up in the whole Red Forest situation, because for her it's like she doesn't want to lose Cole, but at least in the Red Forest they'll be in an eternal now. And the way a Tall Man's dad kind of constructed, it's kind of like, hey, with this you'll be able to like take any memory and kind of reconstruct it however you want to. You can just live in those good memories, because with present day you're kind of stuck being tortured by them, because in his case it's like his first love, Isabella, died. They've known each other and been in love since they were kids. So, and I figured this would probably also be the episode that Tall Man's dad died, because it's like, oh yeah, because the conversation came up in the first episode where it's like, it's like, oh, what about your parents? Elliot had asked him, he's like, yeah, both my parents died when I was young. And it's like, well, we know about his mom. And it's like, oh yeah, what about your dad? That never came up. And it's like, well, now we see that actually Gale was the one who shot. Obviously, like, he wanted to do that just because I guess he didn't want to get captured, so he sacrificed himself like that. Like, he pulled out the jacks, which obviously is a thing between him and Isabella. It was just kind of an interesting turn of events. I'm surprised that doesn't circle back in some shape or form, like Tall Man trying to kill Gale later on. Maybe it's just kind of like, no, for him it's just like, no, like I'm gonna meet my father in the Red Forest anyway when it's all said and done. So maybe revenge is never necessarily on his mind. So, but I wasn't expecting that twist at the end where it's kind of, and I love how they like did it too, like while Cassie and him are having that conversation in the hallway, like the screen is turning red and stuff like that, and she's like, yeah, she's actually kind of getting sucked in by the thought of the Red Forest. So it doesn't really come up in the third episode, but that is something that we're going to have lingering in the back of our minds as everything kind of goes forward. So, and then moving into the third episode, a great episode where we have them going into the 1940s where the Nazis are running around. That's kind of a complicated thing. Like, side note, major props to Jones for killing that situation, being like, yo, I'm kind of making herself look like a bigwig. Actually, I own this property, because Adler kind of made up some fake papers for her and stuff. And Cassie's there, and so is Jennifer and Cole. And I love that whole thing about like, okay, Jennifer, can you speak French? It's like, well, yeah, I spent 5 years there, remember, because you guys left me there. And then, and I made all those albums in French, which none of you assholes still haven't listened to. I'm like, I guess it's like, well, we're on a clock and everything, but still, that's kind of sad. It's like she put so much time and effort into that work. I mean, I guess it's also like, well, it's meant to draw us in, so it's like there's no real reason to listen to those anymore, I guess could be the argument, but still. I also love later on, she's walking, obviously she's a maid and everything, and she's like, oh my god, that's my music playing, but the like entertainment lady is super pissed. She's like, oh my god, smashes the record, and it's like, oh, forget that French whore who died like 20 years ago. I said I never want to listen to her music. And then you just have Jennifer leaving the room, she's just awestruck, she's like, she's almost like, bitch, you what? Bitch, kind of like having that. I'm sure that's kind of how she would react, and I thought that was so neat. Also, like, I'm bouncing around the episode, but I also appreciate the fact is that they had that little moment where it's kind of like Jennifer has to rock out because the entertainment is dead, just to kind of draw out everything so that Cassie and Cole can get the weapon. Well, which ends up not being a weapon, but obviously we'll get to that soon enough. But I love the fact that she's jamming out and everything, turning it into singing a song and everything, getting the band like, okay, this is the rhythm and stuff like that. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, do you want to get shot? No, me neither. So we better get this like done. And even then, the guy that's there, the main dude that they're after, kind of is like getting a little annoyed, but he turns and looks, and Hitler's kind of banging it, like not banging, but like moving his head back and forth to the rhythm. I'm like, God, that's so weird. Like, Hitler's super into what you're doing, which is, it's like, that's so weird. Then there's like the whole Deacon and Cole situation where they get captured, and Deacon brings up the whole fact is, lets everyone know, like, yeah, from the very beginning, I've been on your guys' side. The reason why I killed Elliot, because he would have been forced to finish Titan, and we don't want that. I actually completely forgot to bring that up, and I'm such an asshole for it. It's like, we finally understand more about what Titan's all about, rather than worrying about doing the whole primary things. And once again, it's just kind of a funny thing. They kind of reference it in the show. I brought it up during the premiere, but it's also like, I guess it's also another thing. It's like, oh yeah, like, you could just continue doing the primary thing. So it's like, well, never mind, like, Cole and the others stopped us, so don't make the same mistakes. But also, you can make the argument, it's just from a writer's standpoint of like, nah, we already did it, let's do something else interesting. And that's what Titan's all about. Titan's meant to be like, not just meant to be a time traveling device. That's what the whole time traveling is mainly about, laying the foundation for a lot of stuff they're doing. But obviously, it's to also collect all the pieces that they need, I guess, take it to different points in time so that it can be finished up in that particular time, bouncing. Like, that's what all the bouncing around is meant to be, so that Titan can be completed. And with a completed Titan, they can punch a hole in the very fabric of space and time and create a giant paradox. That's how they're going to create the Red Forest. I'd also completely forgot, it was actually in the first episode, I completely forgot about, I was wondering about the whole Olivia's daughter thing, like what that was going to turn into. Turns out, one of his Elliot's lab assistants, Emma, she's the one behind this. It's kind of interesting because, like, there's a seed that they planted. They try to use the machine to kind of make it grow faster, and it ends up growing into these red roots and stuff like that, where, like, there's a flower kind of growing on one and it kind of dies. That was kind of interesting, and I guess maybe she was the one operating machine and everything like that, so maybe she kind of did that on purpose. But that's supposed to be kind of like the core. That's how they eventually, I guess, realized how and when they could get the core, like, to get Elliot later on, so that they can get the core needed to make Titan the way it is, or what, so maybe, there's no telling how long she's been there. I mean, well, let's not forget, this is like present. No, this isn't. I was about to say it is. Well, her daughter can't be that old. Her daughter has to be like, what? Maybe in her 20s, maybe? At that point in time, she's fairly young. So it's kind of like, because Olivia was pregnant in like 71. So would that even be the present day? Wouldn't that be more? Well, once again, that's why I'm kind of like, no, not unless she did some time traveling. So they might have moved her a different period in time, putting her exactly where she needs to be. I know I'm bouncing all over the place. I can't keep everything coherent. I'm sorry. I'm all over the place. I do apologize. Nevertheless, getting back to what I was trying to talk about before, the whole Deacon killing Elliot was for that purpose. Like, he's actually secretly been helping them the entire time. It's like, you just didn't realize it. I've never turned on you guys. The fact is, I even love that thing of, like, the dude is I love the dude is getting, like, pulling off stuff, and I'm like, because even Deacon's like, what are you doing? No, put your clothes back on. Can't we go back to the punch? I'm like, what is this dude about to do? Is he about to do some weird stuff? Technically, he's got all these scars. He's like, this from that, blah, 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 blah. And he has a Nazi symbol in his chest, and he starts carving that into Deacon. And then luckily Cole shows up in time. Like, I guess Cole's conscience is kind of kicking in, even though everything happened with Deacon, because he even admits it. It's like, yeah, he has his problems with Deacon, but he doesn't hate Deacon. And Deacon, being who he is like, nah. He's like, what are you doing? Like, because he starts messing with the scar on his chest. He's like, what are you doing? It's like, I might be a bad dude, but I sure as hell ain't no Nazi. And so he scratches a 7 in him, and Cole's like, West 7? Really, dude, you gotta let that go. And Deacon just laughs. I'm like, that was a very nice way of handling that. Of course, you turn it into a 7. So, but in the end, it's one of those things where Deacon, I guess, is willing to make the sacrifices, obviously, when him and Jones meet each other again, because it's like, hey, the fact of the matter is, this kind of gets undone when we save the world and everything. You get to be with Elliot and Hannah. You get to, like, not have to worry about any of this BS. I get to be with my brother, and all the terrible shit we've done to people we've killed to kind of get where we are. All that kind of gets erased. So it's kind of for the greater good. Because for him, it's like, I killed Elliot so we could keep you going. Once again, kind of slowing up Titan's, like, completion. So Deacon is the dude that kind of who is to make those sacrifices. It is kind of interesting, really quickly. I wonder, is that a side effect of the splinter radiation. Well, because her getting inside her own head, I guess that's just because it's weird because Jennifer was able to kind of get in there. Like, I guess maybe Jennifer talking to her while she was stuck inside her head kind of made Jennifer project in there. Because part of me was wondering, is that supposed to be like a time thing? Because it was almost like the whole Red Forest thing, like in the sense of like time unraveling and almost like her getting erased. Like, I thought that's what was kind of like happening there to a certain extent, the way she was kind of flashing. But I guess it's just kind of like, I mean, maybe it had something to do with the splinter radiation. Maybe it just kind of like blocked her off into a certain part of her mind. And Jennifer, being connected to time, was able to talk to her like that. I mean, I feel like it could go either way. It's probably more so like, no, Jennifer was talking to her and projected a Jennifer inside of her head. So I liked it. I feel like it could be both ways. I mean, it could be one or the other. So I'm fine with either or. But nevertheless, I just thought that was kind of interesting. I was like, oh, like the side effect, because like even Adler admitted, like, yeah, her conditioning is getting worse. Like her deterioration is, I know I butchered that because I deteriorate. Her getting worse. I cannot say that word sometimes. Like sometimes I can. I'm leaving it in. I could cut it out. It's embarrassing, but it's gonna stand. But I also love handling those dudes, soldiers who are guarding it. Like you had Cassie come out in almost a dominatrix outfit just to kind of distract them. Side note, is it me? Or, like, I don't know. I thought like Amanda Scholl. Is that how you pronounce her last name? I don't think I've ever I've always in my head thought Scholl. I don't know if that's how you actually pronounce her name. The actress who plays Cassie. I think she looked really nice in the second episode when like her and Cole like first get to 66. I thought she looked really nice. I was like, oh man, that 60s looks really good on her. Like, I mean, we're not saying she's not pretty every other time, but it's just kind of like, I was like, oh man, that looked really nice on her. I don't know. Nevertheless, I feel like I'm such an idiot for a second. Nevertheless, I also love the fact is, once again, Jones being the boss that she is, she walks up to the dude and she's like, I even want to say this, go to hell, you little Nazi piece of shit. And just before he's about to pull the trigger on her, Deacon shows up and has her back and kills the 3 guys nearby. So it's kind of sad. Things kind of didn't work out with the whole French resistance. I was kind of setting things up at that time. I guess it kind of worked out in the end to a certain extent, because I love the whole like Deacon, because even Jennifer's like, whoa, are we really just letting Hitler be? Did we just like save Hitler? And then Deacon shows up with the detonator and she's like, oh, and then Jones is like, don't do that. You don't know what that could do. Boom. So I think I wasn't paying as much close attention, but the way she was talking about it got Jones. It seemed like time stayed relatively the same, because I was about to say like Hitler doesn't die at that point in time. So causality is kind of still in place and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of a neat touch. But it's kind of like, hey, it's one of those things. It's like that number one thing you do. And they even reference it's like, yeah, you don't save Hitler. The number one thing you do is kill Hitler. Like if you have a time machine, that's kind of like the big number one on everyone's list type of thing. So I thought that's kind of pretty neat. But it turns out that the device they ended up getting wasn't a weapon, is actually a key, which is interesting. It has this energy around it as kind of resemblance of like the time energy, because time gets a little funky around it. Part of me wonders, because I think it was like, was it Adler or was it? I think it was Adler. He was messing with the splinter vest. And part of me wonders, could that thing be used to power that up, or help at least kind of fix it or some shape or form? Maybe not. I mean, obviously, like, I doubt like it's supposed to be used for that. It means it's supposed to be used as a key to get the weapon, but still. That was just kind of something that popped in my head for a little while, but now sitting here saying that out loud, I'm like, now that's stupid. So never mind. Other things I forgot to talk about, I do apologize because I've been skipping over a whole bunch of stuff. Jones telling the truth to everyone about what's happening to her, because the truth is kind of coming out. I meant to bring this up in the first part about the first episode, but like Jennifer coming clean, well, you know, kind of being forced to come clean about her whole situation. And it's like, oh, Cole, like, I know you're not telling us the truth about the whole, like, where you heard it from. And he had mentioned like, okay, he heard it from his mom, which we took tiny steps in that direction. We haven't taken full leaps, but learning about his mom's maiden name being Marion Woods, which I'm sure that's a hint even right there, but I can't place it, but I'm sure later on maybe all the pieces will click. I think that's going to be one of the biggest mysteries when we circle back to it, is like who his mom is. Like I said, I brought it up before. It's like the running theory on who his mom is. Like I could see that, but at the same time, I feel like it's not. But like I said, we'll ultimately see whether that is the case or not. But it's kind of sad because now everyone does know that Jones has a limited amount of time, and her and Deacon are kind of in that same situation because it's like, well, Deacon couldn't go back to Olivia empty-handed, and you know, you have Jones being willing to make whatever sacrifices she needs to make. Because for her, it's like, yeah, I'm on a limited amount of time anyway. I guess to compensate for the fact that they no longer have Elliot, like Jones turns herself over so that she could be near Olivia to kind of construct, quote unquote, construct the piece they need, the pieces they need or whatever to finish up Titan, to do the whole like punching a hole into fabric and space and time, you know, that whole thing. So I'm guessing that's what's supposed to be. I would assume she told the team what she was up to, like there's kind of no more secrets. And I thought that was kind of a neat thing she had said, where it's basically like, hey, the fact of the matter is, you know, a final wish from a dying woman. Because for her, it's like, for the longest time, she tried to fight it, but at the same time, whoever she is now, she couldn't imagine it any other way, having this group be a family. And the fact of the matter is, be as one. And they're all kind of reunited at the end of episode 3, like all of them, even Deacon's there too. So like this family, they're sharing a drink, you know, Adler's there, just all, it's this powerful moment as we push forward into like these final battles, you know. So obviously, once again, the next stop is 1492, like I said, the Middle Ages, which is like how they're going to get the power to do that. Well, we're going to have to wait and see. But also for Jennifer, this is going to be her chance to meet the primaries who set that all in motion. Once again, this is where we were at the beginning of this season's premiere in the first episode with this. So it's going to be interesting to see the story kind of revolve in that. Because we did see that knight that was in having like a helmet much like the witness mask. But the question is, like, is that Olivia herself? Did Olivia possess someone? Like, what went down with that, you know? So not less that's even more like, well, because with Titan, they probably time traveled there too. So probably having armor so they kind of don't stick out. So, and then there's also the final piece we have to think about too is, where the hell is Hannah? Like, what did Jones send her on a mission to do? Because she like has a completely different mission for Hannah to handle, which is definitely gonna be interesting when she because she's not unless she let Hannah know ahead of time what she had planned, or not unless that was a last minute thing. Because it seemed like she waited till she met up with Deacon before she came up with this idea, so Hannah might not know. Because I'm about to say it'd be weird about if Hannah came back in the whole Deacon thing, especially him recently killing her dad and everything. So there's that complicated thing, but it's like, it seems like Deacon won't be around, neither will Jones. So like I said, we'll see whether or not she really explained everything to everyone. She might have. Like, the only person she might not have explained it to is Hannah, so we'll see. But overall, great episodes. I actually think I forgot to kind of mention that at the beginning, but nevertheless, I'm mentioning it here. These were great episodes. I'm very excited to see what next week's episodes have in store. Obviously, check back next week. I will be talking about next week's next 3 episodes as well. So I'm very interested to see where all of this progresses forward. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.